The trap springs. The dawn came cold and gray, frost etching delicate patterns across the windows of Dr. Harrison's house. James stood at those windows, watching the watcher who'd maintained his post through the night. The man stamped his feet occasionally, breath steaming in the frigid air, but showed no sign of abandoning his surveillance. Behind James, the house stirred to life. Mrs. Brennan moved quietly in the kitchen, starting the morning fire and preparing breakfast. The smell of coffee began to fill the air, rich and bitter. Eleanor descended the stairs, fully dressed despite the early hour, her face drawn but determined. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked, moving to stand beside him at the window. "Some." James put his arm around her waist. "Enough." Sarah appeared next, carrying her rifle with the casual ease that still sometimes startled James. His daughter had become a soldier in all but name, and he wasn't certain whether that transformation had saved them or cost them something irreplaceable. "The same one?" Sarah asked, nodding toward the watcher. "Changed shifts twice. This is the third man." James turned from the window. "They're being thorough." "Good." Sarah set her rifle against the wall. "Thorough means predictable. Predictable means we can use them." Dr. Harrison joined them, already dressed in his neat suit despite the hour. "I've been thinking about your trap," he said without preamble. "If we're going to make them reveal themselves, we need to create a situation they can't resist responding to." "The evidence," Eleanor said. "They think we have Blackburn's investigation notes. What if we made them believe we're about to hand those notes to someone who could act on them?" James nodded slowly. "Judge Carmichael is expected in town next week for the quarterly court session. If they thought we were planning to present everything directly to him, they'd have to move before then," Sarah finished. "Try to steal the documents, or," she paused, meeting her father's eyes, "or eliminate us before we could testify." The room fell silent. Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway with a tray of coffee cups, her weathered face showing no reaction to Sarah's words, but James noticed her hands were steady as she poured. The housekeeper had heard enough dangerous talk in the past weeks to be unshakable. "We'd need to make it convincing," Dr. Harrison said, accepting a cup. "Not just rumors, but visible preparations. Perhaps I could be seen visiting the courthouse, examining the docket. Whitmore could file a motion requesting a special session. And we'd need the documents themselves," Eleanor added. "Something substantial enough that they'd believe it was worth the risk to steal." James thought of the fragments they'd gathered, Blackburn's scattered notes, the confession letters, Pemberton's bank records. "We create a dossier, make it look complete, professional, something that would convince a judge. A forgery," Sarah said bluntly. "A strategic presentation of what we do have," James corrected, though he knew his daughter was right. They were preparing bait for a trap, and the bait needed to look valuable enough to risk everything for. Daniel arrived as they were finishing breakfast, snow-dusting his shoulders. "4 watchers now," he reported, stamping his boots at the door. 2 on the street, 1 behind the house, 1 at the corner where they can see both approaches. "They're expecting something," Sarah observed. "Or preparing for something," Daniel replied, moving to stand close to her. "Johann rode past at dawn. Says Peter Reed and his family made it safely to his homestead last night. They're settling in." But he hesitated. "But what?" James asked. "Reed asked if this was worth it, if helping you was worth losing everything he'd built." Daniel's young face was troubled. Johann didn't know what to tell him. The weight of that question settled over the room like the cold air that had followed Daniel inside. James thought of Peter Reed's burned homestead, the 3 years of work reduced to ash and blackened timber. He thought of all the families who'd helped them, who'd taken shifts guarding the mine, who'd stood witness when they needed allies. "It has to be," Eleanor said quietly, "because if we let them win, if we let them burn out families and murder homesteaders without consequence, then none of us are safe. Not just from this consortium, but from the next group of men who decide frontier lives are cheaper than their profits." James looked at his wife, seeing the steel that had always been there beneath her gentle manner. She was right, and they all knew it. This had stopped being just about their homestead, somewhere between the first attack and Peter Reed's burning home. "Then we set the trap properly," James said. "Dr. Harrison, can you arrange to be seen at the courthouse today? Make it obvious you're inquiring about procedures for presenting evidence? I'll take Edmund with me, Harrison replied. 2 old men asking official questions will attract attention. I'll start preparing the documents, Eleanor said. We'll need to make multiple copies, some to hide, some to use as bait. And I'll spread word that Judge Carmichael has agreed to an emergency session, Sarah added. Nothing official, just the kind of rumor that travels through a town like fire through dry grass. James nodded, feeling the plan take shape. We give them 3 days. Make them watch us prepare. Let them see us gathering evidence, acting like we're about to hand everything to the law. Then we see what they do, Daniel finished. The morning passed in careful preparation. Eleanor and Sarah worked at the dining table, surrounded by papers, some genuine, some carefully crafted to look like investigation notes. They wrote in different hands, creating the illusion of multiple sources and witnesses. James watched them work, marveling at how methodically they approached the deception. Dr. Harrison and Edmund Whitmore departed mid-morning, making no attempt to hide their destination. James watched from the window as the watchers noted their movement, one man immediately peeling off to follow them. Good, Sarah murmured, joining him at the window. They're taking the bait. By afternoon, Daniel had returned from a carefully casual ride through town. It's working, he reported. The story about Judge Carmichael is spreading. I heard it repeated in 3 different places, and each time it got more detailed. What are people saying? Eleanor asked. That you've got proof the consortium murdered the Henderson family. That Blackburn documented everything before he died. That the judge is coming special to hear the case because it involves powerful men from Toronto. Daniel grinned. The best lies are the ones people want to believe. Thomas emerged from the back room where he'd been playing, his young face serious. Are we lying, Papa? James knelt to meet his son's eyes, that familiar weight settling in his chest. We're making people think we have something we don't quite have yet, he said carefully, to make bad men show themselves. Like bait in a trap? Exactly like that. Thomas considered this, his premature wisdom showing in the way he processed the answer. Will the bad men come here? We hope so, James said honestly, because then we'll be ready for them. The boy nodded slowly, then returned to his blocks. James watched him go, his heart aching at how easily his son accepted danger as normal. That evening, as darkness settled over Medicine Hat, they reviewed their preparations. The forged dossier looked convincing, thick enough to seem substantial, organized enough to appear professional, detailed enough that anyone examining it quickly would believe it contained damning evidence. We'll keep it visible, James decided. Let them see us working with it, carrying it between rooms. Make them hungry for it. And when they come for it, Sarah asked, then we'll be waiting. James looked around the room at his family and allies. Everyone needs to understand. When they make their move, it won't be gentle. They'll come prepared for violence. So will we, Sarah replied, and there was no uncertainty in her voice. Dr. Harrison cleared his throat. I should mention, I've arranged for Marshal Davis to be dining at the hotel tomorrow night. He doesn't know why, just that I wanted to buy him dinner. But he'll be close if we need him. Won't that scare them off? Daniel asked. Not if they're desperate enough, Harrison replied. And I believe we're making them desperate. The night deepened. One by one, they took their positions. Sarah at the front window, Daniel at the back, James moving between them. Eleanor stayed with Thomas, keeping him calm and occupied. The forged dossier sat prominently on Harrison's desk, lit by lamplight, visible through the window to anyone watching. And they were watching. James could feel their eyes, could sense the tension building like a storm about to break. Near midnight, Daniel hissed from his post. Movement. Back alley. James moved quickly to join him. In the darkness behind the house, shadows shifted. Not the regular watchers, but something else. Purposeful movement, careful approach. How many? Sarah whispered, appearing at his shoulder. At least 3, Daniel replied. Maybe more. James's heart hammered. Too soon. They weren't ready. But perhaps the consortium had seen through their trap, or perhaps they were simply more desperate than anticipated. Eleanor, he called softly, take Thomas to the root cellar. Now. He heard her move immediately. No questions, no hesitation. That was marriage after years of hardship. Trust without explanation. The shadows in the alley resolved into figures. 4 men, moving with the coordination of professionals. They weren't trying to hide anymore, which meant they'd made their decision. "Dr. Harrison," James said, his voice steady despite the fear. "You should get clear." "This is my house," the doctor replied, appearing with his own rifle. "I'll defend it." The figures paused at the back fence, conferring. James could almost hear their calculations. How many inside, how well armed, whether the risk was worth the reward. Then one of them moved forward, and James saw his face in the moonlight. Not the consortium's usual watchers, but someone new, someone harder. "Professional," Sarah breathed. "They've hired professionals." The man reached the back door, tested it gently, found it locked. Stepped back, considering. James raised his rifle, sighting carefully through the window. One shot would bring the whole town running. One shot would also mean there was no going back, no pretending this was anything but open warfare. The man at the door looked up, directly at the window where James stood. Their eyes met across the darkness. The man smiled, touched his hat in mock salute, and withdrew. The 4 figures melted back into the alley, disappearing as purposefully as they'd come. "What?" Daniel started. "Reconnaissance," Sarah said flatly. "They were testing our defenses, seeing our response time. The real attack comes later." James lowered his rifle, his hands shaking now that the immediate danger had passed. "Tomorrow night," he said. "They'll come tomorrow night." "Then we have 1 day to prepare," Dr. Harrison said. "1 day to turn this house into a fortress they can't crack." Eleanor emerged from the cellar with Thomas, her face pale but composed. "What happened?" "They're coming," James said simply. "But not yet. We have time." "Time for what?" she asked. "Time to make sure we're ready. Time to get help. Time to—" He paused, looking at his family, at the allies who'd stood with them through everything. "Time to end this." The rest of the night passed in tense watchfulness. The watchers remained at their posts, but the professionals didn't return. James knew they were out there somewhere, planning, preparing. As dawn broke, he stood again at the window, watching the town wake. Somewhere in Medicine Hat, the consortium's hired killers were sleeping, conserving their strength. Somewhere in the vast territories, Thomas Garrett rode toward them with evidence that could change everything. But tomorrow night, none of that would matter. Tomorrow night, it would come down to who was better prepared, who was more desperate, who was willing to risk everything. James thought of Peter Reed's burned homestead, of the Henderson family's unmarked grave, of all the families the consortium had destroyed in their hunger for profit. He thought of his own family, transformed by hardship into something harder and more dangerous than he'd ever imagined. Tomorrow night, he thought. Tomorrow night we stop running. Tomorrow night we make our stand, and one way or another, it ends.
Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures. Thanks for watching our stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic adventures.